I now give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Спасибо.
Thank you, Mr. President. Like our U.S. colleagues, we would like to thank our French friends for their successful presidency in July, and we welcome you at the president's seats, and we wish you the very best, and we stand ready to cooperate, and you can count on our help. We thank you in particular, as well as your colleagues, Mr. President, for the fact that the Council is meeting again today to discuss the implementation of Resolution 2118 in person. We are convinced that this is the most effective way to organize such a discussion, and we believe that in the context of the Syrian chemical dossier, transparency is of fundamental importance. First and foremost, given the line being pursued over the past few years by the OPCW Secretariat, Technical Secretariat. We thank Mr. Thomas Markham for presenting the 93rd regular report of the OPCW Director General. Unfortunately, as previous, we cannot agree with many of the assessments contained in it. We were particularly surprised by the positive presentation in the report of the June briefing of OPCW Director Mr. Fernando Arias in the UN Security Council. The report claims that Mr. Arias provided detailed answers to questions asked during the meeting. Colleagues, it is difficult to imagine a more absurd statement that would be further from the truth. There were so many inconsistencies and outright distortions in the responses of Mr. Arias to Security Council members' questions, and they were so glaring that we were forced to respond by circulating our arguments as an official Security Council document. A similar step had to be taken by the Syrian party. We call on all delegations interested in forming an objective view on the matter to study these materials. These are contained in Security Council documents S/2021-641 and S/2021-588. I will not go again into detail regarding all the contradictions we noticed in the statements of Mr. Arias. We expect to do this during the next briefing by OPCW leadership in the Security Council, which we hope will not be long in coming. I will only mention the most egregious point. The Director General was bold enough to assert that the Russian Federation allegedly initially agreed with the findings of the fact-finding missions in Syria regarding the April 2018 Duma incident. And in doing this, he selectively cited the note of Russian permanent mission to the OPCW number 759, dated April 26, 2019. Colleagues, this is blatant fraud and misinformation because in doing so, he omitted the main conclusion drawn in this note, that Russia insists on the staged nature of the incident because the analysis presented in the FFM report does not allow to conclude about the use of toxic chemicals as weapons. We believe that it is at the very least inappropriate for the Director General to assert that the very fact of the calls contained in UN Security Council Resolution 2118 to prosecute those responsible for the use of chemical weapons allegedly gives legitimacy to the work of the so-called IIT that was established by the OPCW in violation of Article 15 of the CWC. The decision of a forced special session of the OPCW Executive Council in June 2018 only asked the Director General of the Technical Secretariat to submit considerations for the involvement of external qualified experts with relevant professional experience in the OPCW's investigations at the request of a CWC state party and in general to strengthen the Secretariat's capacity and means in order to better implement the Convention's verification regime. In practice, however, Mr. Arias and his team essentially created the IIT themselves and developed its terms of reference. The OPCW Executive Council, in violation of paragraph 35 of Article 8, did not even consider any preliminary considerations in this regard. It was presented with a fact. What then is the strictly technical role of the Technical Secretariat that Mr. Arias claims? I want to emphasize that the UN Security Council has never delegated its exclusive attribution powers as defined by the Charter, neither to the OPCW nor, of course, to its Technical Secretariat. And it is not surprising that the reports of the illegitimate IIT were prepared in violation of CWC norms regarding methodology and data collection. They are biased in nature and pursue just one goal: not to restore the real picture of events, but rather to make the facts fit the conclusions about Damascus's guilt, in other words, essentially to carry out a political order. We therefore reject the conclusions on both the already issued reports of the IIT on Al-Tamara and Sarakib, as well as any of its future so-called products. It is shocking that Mr. Arias essentially openly admitted that the OPCW Technical Secretariat does not follow CWC's chain of custody methodology when conducting investigations, and instead uses its own innovative methods of some sort. And this is being presented not a direct violation of the convention, but rather as a point of pride. We regret Mr. Arias's outright dismissive attitude shown during the June briefing towards two now former staff members of the Technical Secretariat who, like fair and impartial civil servants should, were not unable to accept outright forgery and decided to shed light on the glaring manipulations in the conclusions of the Duma report. Contrary to Mr. Arias' claims, both inspectors are highly qualified experts with a great amount of experience in the OPCW, and they were directly involved in the investigation of the Duma incident, of which we have documentary evidence. Colleagues, we have yet still to receive clear explanations from the Director General about why the Technical Secretariat's approach to the initial declaration of Syria are much stricter than towards other countries such as Libya or Iraq, who encountered similar problems yet were not barraged with the same amount of criticism as Syria, which joined the OPCW in exceptionally complicated circumstances of military and political instability and externally fueled terrorism. Despite this, Syria complied with all of its obligations in good faith, something on which the Secretary General reported to the UN Security Council in June 2014. The fact that Syria's chemical warfare stockpiles were definitively limited was confirmed by the Executive Council in 2016. The Technical Secretariat does not have any special prerogatives with regards to Syria's initial declaration in accordance with Article 4 of the OPCW, paragraph 8. Contrary to Mr. Arias' claims, the Convention does not grant the Technical Secretariat any right to apply more complex and politically motivated requirements regarding verification. However, this is what we're seeing in reality. The more Syrians try to meet the Technical Secretariat halfway, hosting inspection teams in good faith and accepting intrusive verifications, the more criticism they receive. I would like to particularly touch upon something mentioned in the report, namely an air strike on a former declared chemical weapons production facility on June 8th of this year, during which two cylinders connected to the Duma incident in April 2018 were destroyed. It is very strange, at the very least, to see the report focus on the fact that the Syrian party moved those cylinders without any assessment of the very fact of this airstrike. Even if the Syrian party did move them within its own territory, which, as we understand, Syria has full rights to do, does this mean that the airstrike is justified, and which is essentially an act of aggression against a sovereign state? And yet this is exactly how some of the paragraphs in the report currently read. We believe that we should now be concerned by another issue entirely. Who did this airstrike really benefit? It certainly didn't benefit Syrians themselves. It is difficult to imagine that they would find, that they would see such a complicated way to rid themselves of these cylinders. It seems much likely that this was an attempt by external forces to cover up their tracks, given the many public discussions regarding the manipulations in the Duma report. We have repeatedly warned Mr. President about the destructive impact that the punitive decision to strip the Syrian Arab Republic of their right, this could undermine the OPCW's authorities. As we know, it was not considered in the Executive Council, and it violates the principle of consensus. And I would like to remind you that, in fact, less than half of member states voted in favor of it, and only the 6 Western states in the current council voted in favor. The others either voted against or abstained, and a number of former council members took the same position. This is an obviously unjust decision, the only goal of which is to make Damascus an outcast, and it destroys the motivation for any other state to cooperate with the OPCW. However, despite this, Syria is continuing to pursue cooperation and is showing openness to dialogue between its leadership and the Secretariat at the highest level. And this is confirmed in the current Director General's report. In our view, this is the best illustration that any claims about the dialogue between Syria and the OPCW faltering are completely untrue and unfounded. Mr. President, in conclusion, I would like to note that all that Russia calls for is strict compliance with the OPCW, both by member states as well as by the Technical Secretariat with its general director. He is called upon to act as a fair broker together with the OPCW. Instead, we see a paradoxical situation where the Technical Secretariat itself violates it, and the Director General, instead of clamping down on such violations, seems to boast about them. We're seeing increasingly dangerous politicization in the OPCW, which is growing every month, turning the OPCW from an unbiased and independent guardian into an instrument of punishing undesirable governments in order to pursue and advance the geopolitical aims of certain states. All of this creates a serious threat to the organization and casts a shadow on one of the main pillars of the WMD non-proliferation regime, and it undermines the effectiveness of the realization of OPCW's mandate. Unfortunately, it seems that the situation of affairs is something that Mr. Arias is quite happy with. Otherwise, it's very difficult to explain his behavior, which already worsens the situation when it comes to OPCW implementing its mandate. And unfortunately, we do not see any further reasons for optimism at this time. Thank you for your attention.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for his statement.